Thank you so much for showing up early. One thing about racers, I think we are used to showing up early, particularly due to the first session. It's one thing I'm very pleased immediately for is to see how many men we have in the room. Because sometimes, hi guys, sometimes, when you see this topic or a subject or whatever of women in racing or women in anything, is then that they think it's only for women. And so it's truly, this world is totally, a blended society, and without men supporting women, without men, helping women, without men understanding women, then the world doesn't turn. So, and I can't tell you how many emails I got from men in the industry saying, is it okay if I come? And I'm sort of like, it's interesting. And one of this little sort of social things that I feel like I've learned culturally is that in most cases, and this is one thing that then sort of makes this maybe not a statement not true, is that women tend to need to be invited to something in anything, where men just show up. So that's what's concerning me about this, is that why are men not all of it thinking they need to be invited to this, So anyway, I just want to thank all of you for coming, but I really want to thank the guys for coming as well. This is really an important subject for a lot of different reasons. I think that, I think you all know I'm Lyn St. James, and I've been in the sport. This is my 44th year. And it is just truly a sport that I love, and I was blessed to find the space in this world where I felt I belonged. And that really is how I felt from the very beginning. I mean, as a fan and spectator, except maybe when I came to the Indy 500 and I wasn't allowed in Gasoline Alley because I was a woman, but that was a long time ago. But I mean, seriously, I've always felt that I really belonged at a racetrack. And it's sort of been a mystifying thing to me that even 44 years later, we're still talking about this. But what I am most excited about is that really we have a lot to talk about because we have a lot of success. We really have, really made, I think, an impact in the industry, and we are continuing to make an impact. But obviously, there are still hurdles, there are still some challenges out there, and there still are opportunities to be explored. And I'm really excited about our panelists because we have such a diverse group of women that are going to have some interesting stories, probably some common threads, but at the same time some very, very unique parts of their careers and their stories that'll hopefully resonate with you guys. So the structure kind of this morning, and I also want to thank PRI, by the way, for hosting this. And Dan was here, and I think he left. But Dan was basically our initiator and our host for putting this thing together. So without having that, by the way, that leadership and that support from the leadership, these types of things wouldn't happen. So we've got to all, and one of the things that I also like to tell everybody or to recommend to everybody is, it doesn't hurt to send a note to either to him or somebody at PR to thank them for doing this, because that's one of the ways they know that this made sense. And so often, there's Dan. So Dan, I'm just thanking you for putting this together and hosting it. And I know Dan would love to hear from you and your feedback about how this event, whether it's something that resonated or ideas about new things that you might want. So I'm going to move right along. We have a fabulous panel. As I said, I'm Lyn St. James, race car driver and author and mentor and speaker and a pain in the butt sometimes to a lot of people. And we have panelists, this is Kara Adams, Chief Engineer, Bridgestone. Actually, I want to read your bio. Sorry. Kara Adams, Chief Engineer and Manager of Race Tire Engineering for Bridgestone Americas, Tire Operations, Firestone Racing, has more than a decade of racing experience after joining the race tire engineering team at Bridgestone Americas Tire Operations in 2007, and has developed tires for road street courses in the Indianapolis 500. Currently, Adams is responsible for overseeing all design, development, and trackside support of Firestone race tires, and heads a talented group that designs tires for some of the world's most demanding driver situations. In addition to her work at Bridgestone, Adams also serves on the boards of several community organizations, including the Akron section of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, the Akron Council of Engineering and Scientific Services, and the Akron Public Schools Project Lead the Way, a pre-engineering program for high school students. Carol, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Katie Hargett. I'm going to try to do these in order. Katie, my girl Katie. Motorsports roots runs deep with Katie. She began racing quarter midgets in Indiana at about age 9, attended the Lyn St. James Women in the Winner's Circle Driver Development Program, and eventually graduated to the USAC Midgets. While attending Ball State University, Hargett got out of the driver's seat and in front of the camera, scoring her first job in local news in Terre Haute, Indiana. She eventually worked her way back into motorsports as a pit reporter on NBCSN IndyCar Service Series and Indy Lights broadcasts. In the spring of this year, Hargett founded Fuel the Female, an organization aimed at helping girls achieve their dreams through motorsports. Kara, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Shay Holbrook Shorley. I'm going to start getting people to do that. You want that, right? No? I thought you did. All right. Shay Holbrook. All right. Well, so Shay Holbrook has become a nationally recognized race car driver. Her diverse racing experience ranges from SCCA club racing, NASCAR late models, and IndyCar's developmental ladder series in Skip Barber Racing, to professional sports car racing in the Pirelli World Challenge and the IHRA Nitro Jam drag racing series, and based in Groveland. No, she's now based in Jacksonville, Florida. I know that. Shay Racing has become a top touring car team in the Pirelli World Challenge, securing several class wins and podiums, and this year competed in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Series, which I hope she will tell us more about. Her pursuits aren't limited to the track, however, as Holbrook is an entrepreneur with interest in motorsports, coaching, driver brand development, public speaking, OEM driver events, track night, and America's experimental programs, and social media marketing, among others. Thanks, Shay. And last but not least, Karen Salvaggio. Did I say that right?
You did.
That's right. Served 9 years in the U.S. Air Force as an aircraft mechanic on B-52s and KC-135 aircraft. Launched her racing career in 1985 at a NASCAR Winston dirt track event in California. From stock car racing, she made the move to road racing with the Vintage Auto Racing Association, known as VARA, followed by performance driving Corvettes in high and low speed events with the SCCA and National Council of Corvette Clubs. In 2000, she joined the American Le Mans Series, competing in the Women's Global GT Series. I remember that. She's also competed at NHRA drag racing events, capturing the Guardia Memorial Overall Competitor Award in 1997 at Firebird Raceway, and top eliminator honors at the Sonoma Drags in 1999. Salvaggio serves as an instructor driver at NCCC, NASA, and Track Guides driving school events, and has secured more than 200 first-place finishes in driving competitions, including the Factory 5 Challenge Series, NASA Time Trial Series, Western Endurance Racing Championship, and was one of 15 female drivers who competed last weekend at the 25 Hours of Thunderhill. She is owner and editor-in-chief of Thunder Valley Racing and travels nationally to support women in racing events. How about a round of applause just for our group. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I really wasn't going to do that, but I thought I would. I kind of came up with some topics, and sometimes people ask me about, how did you do what you did, or whatever. And so I believe now, as you get older, you really do start to look back. Billie Jean King gave me a great a lesson. If you don't know your past, you don't have a future. And so I was spending more time in my last probably 15 to 20 years of actually looking at the past, and really pleased to know that actually we have a past. We have a history of women in racing. And a lot of people thought maybe that started with Shirley Muldowney, or Janet Guthrie, or some person that they may have heard about in racing. And in the reality that we have a very rich history. And so for the women drivers who've competed, there's on the screen Camille Dugas in 1901, drove from Paris to Berlin. 1903, Paris to Madrid, finished these races. Helene Nice, who was the Bugatti queen, raced in the 20s and 30s in a Bugatti Type 35 in Europe and actually came over to the United States. By the way, I got to race the 1925 Bugatti Type 35C at the Monterey Historics previous August. Maria Teresa Di Filippi, who was the first woman to run in Formula One, 1950s Grand Prix racing. Denise McCluggage from the 60s. Won her class at Sebring and is actually, in halls of fame, and actually the first automotive journalist to be inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, besides all of her racing accomplishments. Shirley Muldowney, who we all knew about, Janet Guthrie, Christine Beckers, and Lella Lombardi, who I remember watching run at the 24 Hours of Daytona. Desiree Wilson from the 1980s, who was the first and I think only woman to win a Formula One race, even though it was the sort of second tier series called the Aurora Series. Michelle Mouton, who's now head of the FIA Women in Motorsports Commission and held the record for a long time at Pikes Peak and a World Rally Champion. And there I show up. So, but it's like, how did this happen for me? I'm just going to take a moment. Before there was the internet and social media, I am still and was a student of the sport. I guess I just believe that we always are learning. I studied every type of journal I would read, every magazine, National Speed Sport News, publications, not just in racing, also in the automotive industry, automotive news, advertising publications, because I was realizing I need sponsors to be able to do this. I need to know what is going on in the business. I attended trade shows. I used to go to the SEMA show every year before there was a PRI show. I went to races even if I wasn't racing, because as a fan and spectator, you can learn so much from other people if you just are paying attention. So I was trying to make myself aware of what was happening in the sport and in the industry, and who the leaders were. Whenever I would read something, I'd always look for pictures of the leaders, somebody that they talked about, because that meant they were probably a leader. And if I saw that person in an elevator, at a track, I'd go up and introduce myself. I didn't wait for somebody to make an introduction. I just go up and introduce myself. So sort of throughout that process, I also realized that I was actually creating a brand. I don't know if any of you have heard of Tom Peters. Enough of you are old enough in this room that if you have a business, that Tom Peters was like this guru in the business world for most of the 70s and 80s and 90s. And he wrote a little book that I used to give everybody at my driver development program called You Are a Brand. And that sort of resonated with me. And so because I studied all this, and I used to own an auto parts wholesale distribution company down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I really approached my career as a race car driver, even before I had one, that I was a professional, and I was a business person. And I literally, in a brand, I envisioned in my brain and in my image was I wanted to be a professional race car driver and an automotive expert. So, and I was fortunate when I got Ford Motor Company as a sponsor. Then I started to become an automotive expert because I literally got to go and see so many parts of Ford Motor Company. So that was my brand. And I didn't realize that this didn't all just sort of shape itself ahead of time, but as it happened, it started to take shape. So I think if you think about those, identify an authentic who you are. I remember literally telling everybody at driver development this, and so they're shaking their heads because they went to my driver development program, and actually, you all heard Danica Patrick, and I remember she was actually interviewed, because she came to our driver development program, and she was interviewed on the David Letterman show, and he was asking her something, and she made some comment about how I had told her, and she was 16 years old at the time, that she needed to know who she was. And she was like, I didn't know what that meant. And so what I was trying to get to is you have to define who you are. And as soon as you can do that, I don't care how young you are, because that can change. You will change your brand as you mature. But you really have to know who you are. So that was, I think, a key to, without really knowing so much, that was the key to my success. The other was preparation. Racing is so frustrating because you can't do it all the time. And when you're driving back and forth to work, that doesn't count. And so, how do I practice? I played tennis, I played some other sports, and before a tournament, I go out and drill, hit certain, you can't do that in racing. And so it was like, so how do you prepare? Well, I looked for resources for that. and fortunately came across two great guys, Dr. Jacques Dallaire and Dr. Dan DeRisi from McGill University, and they had a whole curriculum. This was back in the 80s. Now this is all available. There's PitFit here in Indianapolis. There's all kinds of fitness programs, mental fitness, mental exercise. You know, this is a mental activity when you're behind the wheel of a race car, and your reaction time and all that. So it's like, how do you practice that? You can practice that. You practice your brain. And so I found the tools and I found the skills and preparation about the physical and mental preparation. The other part of my preparation was, I don't really know, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a mechanic. I can't even put the decals on straight on the car, you know, and they would, look, what can Lyn do? I can polish the car, I can drive the car, I can listen to what the car is doing, and I can smell different things that the car may be telling me that it's doing, and I have a fabulous feel for what the car is doing, but I can't fix it. But what I had to learn to identify those feels and those smells and those different senses of sound, I read Carol Smith's Prepared to Win and tried to understand the mechanics of the car. I took my first race car's engine, which was my street car, which was a Ford Pinto, the engine apart, put it back together, and it ran, but I had this box of parts left. And I remember I was married at the time, and I said, I don't think this is going to work. I said, don't worry about it. You know, not every piece is a necessary piece when you put it back together again. So, you know, that to me is preparation. It was like, I know that I'm not smart enough to be a mechanic, and I'm not smart enough to be an engineer. But at the same time, if I'm going to be a race car driver, I need to know what the car is doing so that I can tell the people that know how to work on the car what it's doing. So preparation was key. The other for me was networking. I'm not a chatty Sally, you know, I don't just like to do, you know, but at the same time, in fact, I am the kind of person that if I were to come into this room, I would probably be sitting towards the back. I think now today I might be a little more bold, but most of my life, I had to learn to put myself out there and to put myself in, you know, those situations and to meet people. So networking at events, if you go to the events, I would, you know, I even now, I get the exhibitor list and I highlight who I got to see, and even if I never get over there, I mean, I'm very organized about that. And then once and this drives me crazy, because this was, again, I remember I was doing this before all of these tools that we have socially with the internet, is that, you know, I would send thank you notes, I would do thank yous at the end of the year. I used to do postcards. I used to mail postcards that I used to make up about what, you know, I'd have pictures of my race or something to my fans or to my sponsors or to people that I would meet and say business cards. So networking is critical. And of course, through particularly the Women's Sports Foundation, I really learned about mentorship, how every one of us can make a difference in somebody else's life. And the really amazing thing about mentoring and about calling it whatever you have, but I call it mentoring, is that the more you give, the more you get back. I mean, it's just an amazing experience. And so whether you're signing an autograph for a fan or whether you're giving advice to someone else or you're helping someone else in some small way, it is just amazing what you actually, not only do you help them, but what you get back. So through the Women's Sports Foundation, which I became involved with in the 1980s, I learned a lot about mentorship and about how you can make a difference and collectively can make a difference. And the empowerment that I got out of that helped me create my own foundation, which we had over 250 drivers from 33 states and 7 countries come to our program for the 20 plus years that I did it. I have a Project Podium scholarship program that I'm still trying to keep going for women in racing, and now currently working for the RPM Foundation, which stands for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, not what we normally think RPM is. So those were kind of the highlights of what I believe sort of brought me success, brought me some happiness because the sport is a lot of challenges and a lot of sacrifices. So you don't get all of the wonderful things sometimes that other people get in their lives through their work. or through their life. But I can tell you one thing, it's totally enriched my life, and I'm proud, I'm happy, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be able to share that with you. And now every one of these gals are going to have a chance to share their sort of stories about whatever they want to talk about. I told you that. So, oh, wait a minute, I wanted to talk a little bit before we do that. You know, what I really am happy is that drivers are, I always say drivers are stars of our sport. So the drivers are communicators about the industry, really. I mean, when you look at racing, the drivers are kind of who people relate to, who people follow. And so, and in the diversity of the success we've had in women in racing, it continues to grow. I mean, I loved Lyn's shift up where we had 15, I saw a picture of 15 women racing at the 25 hours at Thunderhill. I mean, that statement alone was fabulous. So we really have a lot going on for women in racing. Obviously, most recently there was an announcement made about the W Series that's going to be happening out of the UK in open wheel racing, which has been a lightning rod of discussion. And so you can bring it up if you want. We can have. We're going to do after we do this, and we're going to open questions up from you. So I'm going to leave that as an open issue to talk about. But I also want to talk just briefly that we have a lot of women in technology. So glad we have Karen here representing that. There have been many before her, right? So we've got Anita Milliken, Louisa Garten. This was actually women that I know who worked in technology. Tiffany Daniels, Anna Chapman, Diane Holm, Marianne Maudlin, Lisa Smokestack, Rosella Manfredito, Sabra Cook, Ashley Collette Malik, Alva Cohen, who had the leadership role at General Motors in NASCAR, and Lita Gay, who was the chief engineer with the 2011 winning Velocity. We have executive women in the industry. Lisa Kennedy, Jill Campbell, Vicki O'Connor, who represents the United States for ACUS at the Women in Motorsports Commission. Rena Shanaman, who runs the Detroit Grand Prix. Gillian Zucker, who is the president of Fontana, California Speedway. Julie Grease, who's the current president now of ISM Raceway in Phoenix. Beth Peretta, who created a women's initiative. Claire Williams, who's the head of the Williams Formula One team. Michelle Natan, as I mentioned, is the head of the FIA Women in Motorsports. And Allison Malongnan, who's one of the leaders right here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So, first up, I'm going to do this right in the order, if that's okay, right here. Karen, you're up.
I'm up.
You're up. I want you to, I told you guys, this is a, you can say however you want, but the platform is yours.
Well, I just want to start really honestly by saying it's such an honor to be here with you. You're an icon in this industry, and I sat here and I just said to Shay a minute ago, to be up here on this panel with these amazing women, and then I look out here, and honestly, I was part of that 25-hour thing. Oh my gosh, it was great. It was so great. So there's so many of you that are in this industry already or aspiring to be in here. And these ladies with me and you at the lead of this, and we know there's others that are, marching forward with lots of initiatives. It's truly an honor to be here. And I love what you said. Jacques Dillard? Okay, amazing. I went to a seminar of his at Buttonwillow, and it was amazing what he's done with just all of the physiological parts of motorsport. And I guess if I was going to share anything, I would just tell you, I've had this crazy career from aircraft to, I've been a gearhead girl. So if you're a gearhead girl, own it. Okay, just own it, because some of us, there's a car gene, and we have it. It's out there. I know it's in you, and I want to say, I would have done nothing if it hadn't been for a lot of men who helped me get where I was going. They believed in me, and they kind of, when I had a crazy idea that I wanted to race a stock car, my boyfriend or my husband at the time was always like, let's do it. And then if I wasn't married at the time, I just did it myself. And honestly, I had no clue what I was doing. So people ask me all the time, how do you get into racing? Okay, I'll ask you this. If you want to be a fisherman, where do you go? You probably go to the water, right? Somewhere where there's fish. So if you want to race, go to a racetrack. Go find somebody, and even if you start asking questions, you have to start finding your internal compass, which says, you know what, I want to do this. You're not going to learn how to race if you sit at home and watch TV. You're going to learn to race if you start connecting with people and get out there. And one of the things I love about what my recent partnership with Lyn St and the whole Shift Up Now thing is inspiring women to have the courage and confidence to go out and pursue whatever their dreams are. Years ago, I've actually, for those of us at the grassroots level, you don't earn enough money in motorsports. All you do is like, how do you make $1 million? Start with 3, right? That's how you make money. Because
that number keeps going up every
exactly. So I think what you have to do is for me, I was in public education, and over that time, I found that my calling in life is to help others find and follow their dreams. And I think the older we get, once we have our children, and we want to reach back and hold a hand out to those who want to come up. And one of the amazing things about women, I think, is that we really do network well. And I was using the analogy the other day about how it's important for us to support one another. And so anytime I see things online that are, where it's starting to create a divide between women, I want to refute that. I really want to minimize that. For example, there is about the W Series, for example. I'll just bring it up. I think any opportunity for women in this sport is a good one. It may not be my choice of that, but there's so few opportunities that we have to embrace it. And I use the analogy of when the pioneers went across the West here in this country, and at night they'd circle the wagons. The last thing they do is shoot across the circle at one another. So I think that we need to support one another in whatever there is. For me, whatever your choice is and whatever program you want to choose, if you're going to go into engineering, or if you're going to go into motorsports, you want to be a driver, number one, work on yourself to get the confidence to just go and do it. And you must believe in yourself. And there's lots of ways that you can start thinking about your own persona and develop the courage to get out there. The most powerful thing that you can say when someone offers you an opportunity is yes. Say yes, and you'll be amazed at what happens. You'll be amazed at who you meet, and you'll be amazed at the opportunities and the doors that open. For those people who, they argue for their limitation. Well, I can't do it because I've got that going on, or I can't. No.
Easy to come up with an excuse.
Right. Start saying yes. And if you can't find opportunities, go make them. Truly. And this whole thing about guys and the girls and that, I don't get into that. Truly, when I worked on B-52s, there was nobody else on the flight line. And I had to kind of be assertive, when I wanted to launch a plane, I was a crew chief, and I wanted to be the person with the headset and plugged in and talking to the pilot. And honestly, the person I was working for was like, well, you can't do it. And I said, well, I'm never going to do it until you give me the headsets. And I literally grabbed them and put them on my head. I said, I love you. And he was the staff sergeant, and I was like, airman, nobody. But I was like, if you really want to call me out on this, I'm good with it. Because I was willing to go to the commander and anywhere else, because that's the only way that I was going to learn how to actually talk to the pilot, launch the plane, and do that. So you have to have a little bit of, be willing to own it. And if somebody puts you down for it, well, then, go find somebody else who will support you. I believe that in business, or if you're driving a race car, people, men, women, anybody, they respect you if you're competent, if you're honest, and you work hard. So if you want to drive a race car, you put yourself in the seat of a race car every chance you get. When I went from Corvettes to driving the Cobras are extremely tail-happy cars. Corvettes make everybody look great. This is just the way it works. So if you want, you go from something, you're like, oh, I look great. And all of a sudden, you're like spinning off the track, and you're like, okay, don't blame the car, it's me. So I went out and just, I literally drove 3 weekends a month, and I would go somewhere. I was staying up all night to make the travel, but it didn't matter because I wanted to be the best. And I stopped blaming everybody around me, oh, they have more horsepower. No, you work on yourself. When you do that, then you start winning. So anyway, I am so thrilled to be here, and I've admired you forever, and it's
We've
just
communicated a lot over the years.
We have.
Before emails. That's just amazing.
And this gal was my teammate last weekend at the 25.
I know.
So
Well,
Shay,
you're populating them here. I know. All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Jay.
Gosh, where do I start? How's everybody doing? Pretty good. Thanks. It's really nice to see the room fill out. I really appreciate everybody coming. I've been, gosh, I guess this is like I don't even know what year it is, but I've been coming to PRI pretty much for the past 10 years. And two things just about past stuff is when I decided I wanted to be a race car driver, my story is kind of unconventional in that I've always considered myself an athlete. I was a nationally ranked competitive water skier growing up. I come from humble beginnings. I'm an only child. My dad was in the Navy. He was gone a lot when I was younger, but I never felt like my dad was gone. My mom was a fantastic mom, stay-at-home mom, and I grew up on the water. And I did a NASCAR experience when I was 16 at Daytona as a right seat deal, and I fell in love with racing. And to that extent, in that day, that was all I knew about racing. And when I started doing some research, just as we're kind of discussing, I found this thing called PRI, and at the time it was happening in my backyard in Orlando, Florida. And my dad said, I'm going to send you to it. And I'm like, cool, we're going to go. And he goes, nope, there's no we. And I said, what do you mean there's no we? And he goes, I'm going to make you business cards and you're going to go on your own. It's like, okay. And he goes, I'll drop you off though. I'm like, I have my license, you know? And he's like, yeah, but with parking and everything, I'll drop you off. So he makes me business cards, and the first day was miserable. I felt like, in a way, the elephant in the room, but at the same time, completely invisible to people. It didn't go well. It was so hard to make interactions. It was so hard to get other people's business cards. I didn't know what to say. And I realized it was all probably because of my delivery. Like when I went back and I discussed it with my parents, and it was all, I realized that what I was saying wasn't really the right thing to say. And what I was saying was, something to the extent of, hi, my name is Shay Holbrook. I'm 17. I had just turned 17, and I'm an aspiring race car driver. And hi. I mean, that was it, right? So there was really people would respond back to me like, hi, nice to meet you, and that was it. And I think because I was younger. Looking back, like in hindsight, right? Like you learn from these experiences, and the next day, I knew that instead of just kind of going booth to booth, like I decided that I went through the directory, and I found exactly what booths I thought that I wanted to go to. And that night I stayed up all night, like researching companies and saying, ooh, I really like this company called Lucas Oil, and oh, I really like this company called Weld. And I just something about that company attracted me without really knowing too much knowledge. And also, I think it was pre even going to PRI. I knew that I needed to find an industry leader that I felt I could be like-minded with and that I admired. And based on what I saw and read and etc., I needed a mentor, and that's where she came around. Lyn and I have been friends now for 11 years, I guess it is, that I've been in the industry. But it all starts with like showing up. So thanks for showing up, and it's really cool to see as many like men and women in the room. I mean, when we first started this, it was a little bit smaller, and each year I think it grows and grows and grows. And maybe there's some hot topics going on out there with women in racing, and I think this is a really cool, pivotal time for women in racing, especially maybe even since when you first started, Lyn. And we all, maybe some of us here. I think this is a really cool, pivotal year for motorsports and in general. And we can talk about some of those hot topics if you'd like. And Lyn asked me to talk. We're kind of in a roundabout way talking about brand. My brand is always evolving, and I am constantly trying to make sure that my vision and focus, though, is pretty clear. And Lyn was discussing how, she was the person that would sit in the back of the room. Well, I'm the person that will sit in the front of the room, and I will talk my ass off, okay? And but I kind of needed to realize that less is more at times, and although you want a great network, and you want to know every single person in the room, and sometimes it can be too much. Like my recommendation in honing in on what you want your brand to be is finding, and it's not people you idolize, it's people that you respect. Because there's a big difference between people that you idolize and then people that you respect. Because you might find out that the people that you idolize really aren't the people that you're truly actually going to respect when you get to know them, right? And I found some of that out the hard way. But find, network, get to know somebody here, this seems like always such a take industry, at least half of us in the room have showed up to hustle, to make connections, find some sponsorships, figure out a way to get a car, find a new job, whatever your motive might be when you're here. But really spend the time to actually get to know somebody. And this is such a fast-paced, ever-changing industry that it takes a long time for things to kind of happen. I mean, because of my upbringing, and it was, different in motorsports, I knew that my brand was really important from day one. And the reason why I knew my brand was important is because I didn't have any capital. I didn't have any cash to go racing. And luckily I have very supportive parents. So whether it's parents or whoever you're going to be tight with, you can't do it alone. You have to have a supportive group. And my parents sold things, never bought certain things just to support my career initially. I owe them a lot, I know I do. And I'll pay them back one day. But you really need to have a small support group, not a large support group. And I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Sorry? Yeah, I know. I'll pay them back eventually.
You just can't do it alone.
You can't do it alone. So you really need to find like those couple people in the industry, and it's those couple people though. You have to. It's not their job to stay on top of you. It's your job to stay on top of them. And I think that's why I know there's people in the room that I recognize, and I'm going to say Lyn because Lyn and I, we stay on top of each other constantly. And I went through her Women in the Winners Circle program. I also am now affiliated with the Women's Sports Foundation. I sit on the advisory panel, and I am a recipient of the Project Podium grant. And these are all things and ways that I found a way to, of course, benefit myself, but at the same time, I'm like very passionate about who I am in the industry and what I hope to represent from an outward view, right? Because you always are trying to, in your head, you think that you represent one thing, and you hope that that correlates well to how it's received in the general public. And I think that's a tough thing.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to break out of my own rules. One of the things about the branding I wanted you to talk about is not just your branding, but it's how well you've branded your sponsors.
Sure.
I mean, you have done an amazing job, whether it's Bubba Burger or Lucas Oil, about getting their brand out there and not just making it about you. So could you talk a little bit about how hard you work at that? Yeah,
I work on, 90% of being a race car driver is everything in the dark hours. It's, creating the partnerships, finding the sponsorships, how you communicate those sponsorships, and then 10% is driving, right? And driving is really just a beneficiary of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I think for me, what I found is, I'll tell you the story about like Bubba Burger and Lucas Oil. So Lucas Oil, I met 10 years ago at PRI, and I walked up and on the second day, and I just said, I feel like I represent what Lucas Oil is, made in America and proud of family. And I think that because I had key words and it was very short and to the point and it fit their mantra and vision and mission, that kind of turned them on to wanting to communicate more with me. I had to hustle year after year after year, obviously, for that relationship to blossom. And then with Bubba Burger, what you find in your local grocery store in the frozen food aisle, it's not actually a restaurant. A lot of people think it's a restaurant. Should have brought coupons. So with them, that was a 4-year chase. And a 4-year chase. And I had created a relationship with the company. They weren't doing anything. And finally I had a conversation where it was, let's do something or not, because at this point, I'm potentially wasting my time. And I had to have a heart-to-heart conversation, and they just decided to come in a big way. So it went from nothing to something in a big way. But the way that I communicate my sponsors is it's a lifestyle. So whoever you want to be affiliated with, it should be your lifestyle. It should fit well into your persona, your brand, because then it becomes so easy to communicate that sponsor. You know, and drivers need to stop doing this. You know, you win a race, you're on podium, you're having an interview, and you just rattle off your sponsors. Completely freaking meaningless. And it gets, nobody even hears what you're saying at that point. But it became very easy because if I was talking about the performance of the car, I could talk about how great I could tie in Lucas Oil. And right when I was, if I had to jump from car to car, or if we had a race in between, you know, right when the interview was ending and I could tell that they were trying to wrap up the interview, I would even end the interview for them saying, you know what, I am starving at the moment, so I'm gonna go grab me a Bubba Burger and I'll be right back in this number 67 Honda, yada, 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 right? And I just found a way to kind of correlate it. And here's the other thing. So on television, you could probably chime in on this. So on television, they don't really, sportscasters and stuff, like they're told, you know, we have the series sponsors, and obviously we want to promote them, but we're not going to just like shamelessly allow these drivers to promote all these other sponsors that, you know, it's a different relationship.
We try to cut you off.
They try to cut us off, but if you just keep talking and you're strategic in strategic in how you say it, it comes off so effortless and it's really captivating. So my suggestion would be is your sponsors have to be a lifestyle. Figure out a way to make it a lifestyle, not just a not just a check or a product.
Okay, thank you. You got to it. Thank you.
I told you. I said it's part of the room to stop.
Okay, Cara, we're going to get to you, Katie, too. I promise. So yeah, that's all right.
They're much
Okay.
more important.
Cool.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lynn and Dan and the other panelists for having me here. This is just a fantastic way to reach out and talk to young ladies about motorsports. So thank you for the men and the women in the group, but I'm really excited to see the young ladies and the girls out here in the audience. And if you guys have questions afterwards, I'm sure we'll be around. We'd love to chat with you. My background is a little bit different, and I wanted to talk a little bit about persistence in mentoring. Both of those are really important in my background. So I'm a mechanical engineer. My parents were both educators. My mom was a science teacher. My dad was a Spanish teacher. My grandfather was an engineer for NASA, worked on the space shuttle. So I got the love of science before I actually got the love of racing. So I knew I wanted to do something in science and engineering, but when I went to the University of Akron, the first time I ever actually saw a race car, open-wheeled race car program called Formula SAE. A lot of you are familiar with it. A lot of the people that are in the IndyCar series and a lot of other racing series started at some point in college with a Formula SAE car where you're designing it, you're building it. I walked into a machine shop one day, not really sure what to expect, and I had no mechanical skills. I had no knowledge of racing, anything at all. I walked in there and I started off by cleaning shop floors and marking up parts and having people tell me what to do. But it was through that process I learned how to use a mill, a lathe. That's where I rebuilt my first engine. It's really where I got the racing bug in the first place. So there were a lot of people along that path that helped me and a lot of people that inspired me. I'm from Akron, Ohio. So one of the things that we were all really paying attention to was the space shuttle. Judy Resnick was an engineer from Akron, Ohio. She was actually not about 5 minutes away from where I lived. So that kind of made an impact on my life. So whether it's people like Lyn St, people that are current drivers, people who are doing things, there are people out there that inspire people. So I encourage you all throughout your lifetime to try to encourage the next generation. I also wanted to talk about persistence. To be able to get in racing, when I was younger, people said, oh, you know, I don't know if you're even going to be a good mechanical engineer because you're not very mechanically inclined. Well, I build my own engines now, so there's that. So being persistent, finding out what you really want to do. One of the things that I knew I wanted to work in racing from the moment I set foot in that Formula SAE shop. How do I get paid to do this for a living? How do I do something that's technically challenging? So I went out and went through the career at the University of Akron and tried to learn as much as I could about racing. And I tried to get myself as many opportunities to talk to people in the industry. when I looked for jobs, one of the things at Bridgestone Americas, I knew that they had a strong racing program. They won the first Indy 500 in 1911. Ray Haroon in his Marvin Wasp went to victory lane on the Firestone tires. So I knew that if they've been around racing that long, I'm a pretty good shot that they're going to stay in racing for a while. So I started out, nobody really starts in racing, some people do, but I started in our tire vehicle dynamics team. That was a team where I was trying to match the passenger tire with the right car, and learned a lot about vibration and all kinds of things that actually help me in my job now. When I went there wasn't an opening, so I talked to the manager at the time, and I said, listen, I would love to work in racing, and I think I would be a great addition to your team. Here's a little bit of my background. Can you tell me what kind of skills or traits your ideal engineer has? And he kind of looked at me a little funny. Nobody's really ever asked me that. I said, great, I can come back in a couple weeks, we can talk. And I did come back, and he had talked to a couple of people in his engineering staff, and he gave me 3 main things that he wanted me to look at. One was vehicle dynamics, one was computer programming, and one was basically understanding how tire behavior affects the race car behavior. So I was like, okay, I have a little bit of vehicle dynamics background, but I bought books I studied on my own. Anything I could volunteer for at work that would lend itself to any kind of race tire application, I did, to learn about as much as I could about race tires. Volunteered for stuff, studied at night. That way when I went to the interview, they had no choice but to hire me. That was my goal, is to go in there.
You probably knew more than they did, right?
Yes, yeah, so absolutely. So I went in, and I was immediately the expert in the team. My first position in Firestone Racing was designing street course tires. And I went in there, and a lot of times you go into a new position and you think it's going to be a while before I can contribute, especially in a technical role. But I went in there and immediately was able to solve a problem that they had been looking at for a long time, trying to figure out why they made a certain change in the tire, and the drivers felt something in the tire and they couldn't figure it out. And within about a week of looking at data and doing some testing, I was like, okay, here you go. Here's your PowerPoint presentation with all your graphs and charts, but this is exactly what the drivers are feeling. So it was really neat to have that preparation. So I would encourage all of you to just, if there's something that you want to do. Lyn's told her story about sitting in the back of the room. I used to be the person that sat in the back of the room or was even scared to come in. But just be there, be present. Try to find things that are going to get you to that position that you want to do, whether it's racing or whatever it is in life that you want to do. Just do that extra effort, be persistent, and just act like you're more confident than you are if you're not confident.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Katie, you're up.
So it's kind of surreal for me to be up here because I've been coming to this seminar since PRI has been hosting it, and at 11 years old, I met Lyn, and I remember I was like the nerdiest 11-year-old you can be, like
Well,
total,
not true, but that's all right.
total break space, like the Big Bang, the whole weird, awkward stage of life, and I just remember looking up at Lyn and being like, she's a badass. And Danica was there that year, Aaron Crocker was there, Melanie Troxel,
That was
so many.
That was a powerful group.
Yeah, so many names that today you think those women made a difference in motorsports. So, and Shay. So attended Women in the Winner's Circle for several years and driver development with Lyn for 2 years. And those lessons have stuck with me through every transition of motorsports that I've been in. So I started as a driver, raced from 9 to 21, and in college, my dad was like, okay, we can't afford college and racing. You really need to start making some choices here. And at Ball State, journalism is a huge thing. And I had grown up racing Dylan Welch, who many of you may know now works with MRN and NBC on NASCAR. And his dad went to Ball State. So I went to Vince and I'm like, okay, what do you think? Can I do journalism? And he's like, absolutely. Here's who you need to meet at Ball State, and just really jumped right into journalism. And I was racing USAC at the time and said, hey, I can't drive anymore, but I know a lot about the series. Social media was starting to pick up. This thing called Twitter was around, and I started reporting and being their social media digital reporter. Eventually I made a demo reel, and Mike King, who was the main anchor of IndyCar at the time, just happened to stumble upon my demo reel, invited me out to work with him in St. Pete that year, and I was still in college, and worked St. Pete as a radio pit reporter. there were no full-time positions at the time, so I just, like many of these ladies, kept in contact with him. I was emailing him at least once a week at minimum, saying, hey, here's an update on my demo reel. Do you have any advice? What can I do to get my foot back in the door at IndyCar? And that has snowballed into, where I am now and working full-time with IndyCar. But along every step of the way, I was studying. If I wanted to be a race car driver and we were going to a new track, I was finding out who would race there, what their line was like, what their setup was like, and watched old races there. Now, as a journalist, every race, I'm watching the race, at least the race from last year, but when we're going to that race, and I'm watching the race we just came from, I'm Googling every driver, hitting the news option, going through their social media, I'm asking them questions themselves. So along every step of the way, I've just been a student. I've been asking questions. Like these ladies also, found somebody that I respected, that I knew, like Shay said, I knew them here, and I knew that they would not only be honest with me, but they would give me good advice. And I think that's also a key is you got to find somebody who is honest with you. You can't have people surrounding you that are just yes people and telling you you're awesome, you're so good, because that's not always true. And I think that if you can find somebody that's honest with you, that they can help you steer you in the right direction. That's it.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So you've heard some stories and some advice, and I've been told we're good till 10, right, Dan? So we're not like we've got to shut.
You can definitely go over.
We can go over. Okay. So
You knew we were going to go over? I know.
So I really want to make this, meaningful for you. Besides, really cool stories and all that. So I'm going to open it up if any of you have questions. If not, I'm going to try to maybe ask some. But I really want you to. Hopefully you were listening. Hopefully you were thinking about what you were hearing, and now kind of how can we help you? How can we in your careers, in your life? And if you would, when you have a question, raise your hand, give me your name. I don't have a mic to go around, but I will repeat the question. So as long as I can hear you, then it'll be transferred. Lyn.
So I'm Lyn St, and thank you all very much. You shared some great advice. If you were to look back at your 16-year-old selves, what advice would you give your 16-year-old selves?
Okay, did everybody hear that? I think you've got a great voice, Lyn. You should be up there. So what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self? I'll let all of you, any of you, so just, if you got the answer, pop up.
I'll jump in here. My 16-year-old self would not believe that I'm doing what I'm doing. And my 16-year-old self really thought maybe engineering was a choice, but didn't think I would be able to be in the role I'm at now. Just to go back and have confidence and just to step forward. And as we're answering these questions to the young ladies out there, just be confident. If there's something you want to ask, just go ahead and ask it, but just to be confident. And that's exactly what I would tell all of you.
Fake it till you make it, kind of a thing.
Act as if, I heard. Act as if you have the confidence, if you don't.
Anybody else?
Nailed it.
Fear is a state of mind, but will is an action taken. And just show up. Show up as much as you can. Even if it takes spending your own money and driving however far you have to drive or get on a plane, show up.
Right. And I just, actually, you've probably heard this, hope is not a strategy.
I hadn't heard that. I'm going to just key off of what Shay just said, though. Show up, but have a plan. Even if you have to change the plan or it wasn't a good plan. But don't just show up and stand there, because sometimes that's what I see. And particularly the really young ones, is, and it's kind of like the way you started, Shay, when you were 17 years old, like you didn't have the right, we unfortunately, they've gone through a lot of these things that I've taught, which is the elevator speech, you know. I mean, I don't care if you have if you've won one race, if you have gotten one A on a test, if you had one class or 1 year that you got a 4.0, whatever success you've had, have that. That's a jewel. That's something to be proud of. So with your posture, when you show up, you know, and don't just stand there, and if somebody says, well, what do you want to do? Or what, I mean, just put your best foot forward when you do show up, even if it's just a little step, and have a firm handshake. I mean, you don't have to be like Danica and take somebody to their knees, but not a wet noodle, because that's a message. Everything that you do is a message. You know, every step you take, every movement you make, every word out of your mouth, but everything is you know, we are nothing more than a communicator. We're a walking, living communicator. And so just, you know, don't be paranoid about it, but just think about it and be aware. And that's hard at 16, you know. I mean, it's hard actually at any age, but it's a lot harder at 16 because you don't have a lot of life experiences. And that was really cool that your dad just dropped you off. I mean, you know, it's much.
Yeah, wasn't it?
And I mean,
In retrospect.
Oh, but I'm hoping. I mean, I assume a lot of you are parents that are in this room. I hope that some of you are also owners of businesses and that are wanting to either mentor or help some women that work for you, or maybe have more women that work for you. But you know, it's a case of, you know, you have to be able to let the bird fly or whatever, you know. So, you know, and if you stumble, then you've got to be there to back them up and pick them up, and then help, you know, help guide them. So, you know, yes.
I'm Nikki Shard with Four Joint Wheels. Hey, your dad.
Hi. Yeah.
So I'm an amateur driver. I'm a grandmother. I'm past my aspiration.
I just became a grandma too.
Me too.
So yeah, it's a little bit different for me. My aspirations for being a car driver are very small now, if non-existent. But one of the things as an amateur I find difficult is I don't have sponsors. I don't have people at my beck and call. We have to fit into a man's world, physically, literally. A man's seat, men's shoes that are too big, gloves. I have to have a custom suit because they don't make women's sizes in suits. Undergarments, you know, Lady Eagle's great, but you know, there's all sorts of things that physically we have to conform to that, which really sucks. So any of you on any boards that are oriented to women, lobby for some clothing manufacturer to actually manufacture for women. Cindy Lux is a friend of ours, and I asked her how she got. She had fabulous Nike driving shoes, and she just happened to say her neighbor worked for Nike, and that's how she got them. I don't know those kinds of connections, but what does the common woman and young ladies here who don't have those, you know, get their suits for free? What do you do? How do you get around that?
You know,
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if did everybody hear it? So it's just a matter of the apparel and also just the life of all of the parts, everything that we function in, are not really, you know, accommodating for a woman. So what do we kind of do about that? So
Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have so been in your shoes, literally. You know, for 30, well, I've been racing for 34 years, and always we're fitting in. There's actually a big movement right now, and a number of the manufacturers are making women's clothing items. For them, it's a risk because they don't know how many of us are out there.
Right. There's not enough volume. I mean,
Right.
from a business,
Right.
you don't understand that.
But I mean,
But if they made it, you'd buy it.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I know that Lyn and I have talked about, and I'm sure you've faced it over the years. Everyone that's went through your program, you know, you're trying to find the gear. There are actually manufacturers out there. Afterwards, I'll be more than happy to talk with you because I agree with you. And I don't want to say it's vanity, it's just that when you are a woman doing this and you're driving on track, it's like, I'll tell you what, I give my car to co-drivers because I drive these 25-hour races or long enduros, and I'm sharing them, and I tell my co-drivers, who are often men, do not leave the surface of the track, ever. I don't care what you do, you're not allowed to spin, you're not allowed to crash, because when you do, I own that. because it's my car. I can tell you, people have taken my car off a track, 8 years ago. When I go to that track, they're like, oh yeah, you were the one. I'm like, no, it was my co-driver. But when you're the woman in the car, I can tell you, it's always your fault.
It's always the woman in the car.
It's always, even last weekend, we had an incident at the very beginning of the race, and we had the same livery on a car that, one of my co-drivers was with, and immediately it was like, oh, the girls crashed. It wasn't the girls. So, I mean, honestly, we do, when we get out of the car, we want to look good, because somebody's going to come up and they're going to, So it's good that you wear a great suit and you have clothes that fit. You need to do that.
I'm going to add that from a safety standpoint. So, because if don't take shortcuts. I mean, I'm still dealing with it in the vintage world, because I'm driving I don't have a race car, so I'm driving other people's cars, and most of them are 6'2" and weigh 300 pounds. So I'm trying to figure out how to drive this car, and I got to be able to reach the pedals, I got to be able to reach the steering wheel, I got to be able to reach the shifter. And so, I'm often sitting in, and I'm very hard to fit, period. I mean, when they had to pour my seat, which I love when I had my own car and I had my own seat, but they're like, oh God, we got to do another one, because I'm weird as far as my body style. But, so know what you need and figure it out as far as the seat stuff go, but don't take shortcuts. I mean, there are 2-part foam inserts. I used to look like I've been carrying one of these baby seats, when I ran the 24 Hours of Daytona with Tom Roy and Bill Elliott. They were both over 6 foot, and I'm, with my little baby seat, having to put the seat insert every time we did a driver change. So, and I mean, I've sat in cars where they put, which is not a good idea, but for a test or something, not for a race, but where they've just put blankets and stuff like that in, but just to try to get the few laps. But when you're in a race, just don't take shortcuts. Make sure you're safe. And if you have to, I mean, I've worn men's underwear forever. I mean, just I don't care. And I've worn men's shoes. I had to get bigger shoes at one time because the pedals were so big. But there's a men's, like I'm a lady 7, and if you get a man 6, I mean, sometimes so make a point of the things that are important. Don't make shortcuts. The other thing I just found out that SCCA started a women, plural, on track. I want to make sure I had that right. And so, if collectively we can make change, otherwise we're just a bitch. We're somebody complaining. But if we can gather and see what's out there, communicate that to others that are, and then the industry will then, maybe 1 or 2 companies. That's all we need. We don't need everybody to make women's sizes, but we at least need 1 or 2 or 3, so we have a choice. And I just heard last night that Bell is coming up with an initiative. What's it called, Katie?
Shay's in it.
Yeah.
Oh, Shay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a mentoring program for women in motorsports, and essentially it's as simple as they've created an email. I think it's mentor@bellracing.com. And it's non-solicited unless you want it solicited, and it will go to a group of mentors that I'm on one of the panels for it, and we give advice per our time and per the topic, and it's just a way to reach out and ask questions, and especially if you don't want to ask questions in the middle of a room.
So there's Bell, who's an industry leader in safety equipment. So if Bell, they don't make suits, but it's starting. Sometimes you get the ball rolling, and then the Bell talks to. I know a lot of them have collab.
I mean, the majority, a lot of equipment manufacturers, they actually do a lot of similar business. Like
Right. Well, they talk to each other too, though. That if they don't do one, then they do the other. So there's ways of kind of making that change. And the Fuel the Female, I don't know. I mean, so use the networks, I guess, that are out there and try to, but don't take shortcuts, please. Yes?
My name's Taylor Raffy. Lynn, you said a little while ago, have a plan. So we have a diesel performance shop, so I've never been in a race car, but I drive some fast trucks. So as someone who wants to race, I want to drag race, I want to race, but I'm also trying to grow a business or help grow a business in the motorsports industry. Do you have any other things here at PRI this weekend that I should go attend, any other seminars or people I should talk to? kind of thing, somebody that I should really, really help me make a plan. Do you have any advice?
Okay, did everybody hear that? I don't want to take time for you. Where are you based?
Calgary, Alberta, so we're up in Canada.
You're in Canada,
Yeah.
okay. So, and it's diesel trucks?
Yeah.
Okay. So my quick response is there was a business seminar on Wednesday called the Racetrack Business, the RTBC.
Okay.
That would have been good to go to. I don't know all of the other seminars that were on the PRI schedule, but I would have definitely been perusing those and gotten in to be able to, to see those. And obviously, if you go through this directory, you'll know who the diesel-related industry and companies are. And then the other is, you did a great job of telling me kind of what you are wanting to sort of try to do, but you haven't asked me anything specifically.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able, and that's okay for this particular forum, but when you approach somebody, you have to know exactly what you want from them. So whether it's product, whether it's, whatever it is that you need, it's like get to the point and tell me what you want. You want advice, but you're not really. Do you want to drag race a diesel truck? Do you have an NHRA license or an IHRA or a whatever the sanctioning is? I don't know what that is, but be as specific whenever you're asking for something, particularly when you're talking to an industry representative. The other thing is when you go to these shows and you are talking to people, this is a little delicate, but you can get to it, is to, they hire people sometimes to just man the show, and they really are just sort of temps, or they aren't people that are decision makers. And you can't just, when you meet somebody, and I hate trade shows because you're always looking at name tags rather than looking at people in the eye. And when you're communicating, you want to be looking at people in the eyes, but you got to figure out who they are. And so you're looking at name tags, and then you're looking at hopefully a title and all that. So you can't just say to somebody, are you capable of making a decision? Are you responsible? But you do need to find out what their title is, and then particularly if you are making an ask for something, and you need to find out be specific about who represents Canada with your company. Because you could spend 15 minutes talking to somebody who has no influence in what it is you want or you need. And so get to that point of what you need, and then am I talking to somebody that is capable of giving me an answer? And so you could directly ask them, is there someone here representing Canada? Or, you know what I'm saying? So get to the core as quickly as you can. Yes?
My name is Jamie Moreno, and I'm struggling with how to go from amateur to professional. So what is the key element to kind of do that?
Okay. I think that we all heard that. Trying to go from amateur. What type of racing? Oh, thank you. What type of racing?
I do global time attack, so time attack cars.
Give her the microphone, please, because I didn't hear that.
I do time attack.
Time attack.
Yeah.
Is that road racing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Oh, time trial. Okay. Okay. Does somebody here want to get it, or do you to go from amateur to pro?
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that. I think the only thing, my answer would just be my personal experience. For me, it was getting involved in programs that I knew that I could learn from, like Lyn's and others. It was showing up at trade shows. It was in the dark hours, after school work or after other work, researching companies. I think ultimately to bridge the gap from amateur racing and I'm both. I'm an amateur racer and I'm a professional racer, and I hope to be a professional racer next year. I still haven't solidified my plans. So I think to bridge the gap, though, you need to you need to position yourself as a brand ambassador. I think that's the biggest thing, is you need to position yourself as a brand ambassador, and you need to be the best you possibly can be in that race car. So whatever it takes, and there's people way better than me in a race car, but to live with yourself, know that every single time you show up, you're giving 100%. And sometimes that day is your 100% is really truly 100% and you're winning. and other days you're giving 100%, and maybe it's really only 80% in the situation. But never show up, back to that preparation thing, never show up and wish that you didn't give your 100%. But bridging that gap will be kind of those two things, I think. That's a kind of a really difficult question to answer, because there's so many, opinions and
I'm
suggestions.
going to add to that, though, because to me, first of all, does the type of racing that you're doing, because I'm not really familiar with it, does it have a professional category? Well, you need to know that if you want to do that, because it may not, and that means you've got to move into a whole different type to be professional. The other thing I'll say, the only difference between an amateur and a professional is whether there's money at the end of the deal. If you are earning money, not just earning money from a sponsor, but I mean if there is a payout versus a trophy. If you're an amateur, that means that, you win the race, you win the championship. Here, I got so many SCCA trophies. I'm not complaining, but that's an amateur. If I got a check, or the owner of the car that I ran for got a check, that means it's a professional race. To me, that's the only difference. The other is, once you get anything, a product or money, it is a business. It doesn't mean maybe you're a professional, but you are now in the business of racing versus you're now doing it as a hobby. Because once you get an exchange, then you owe something for that exchange, and you better know what it is you owe. So that means they give you product, you put exposure on the car, or you're a brand ambassador, whatever it is, you need to know what it is you're doing to get that money. Now, does that make you a professional? But if you're not racing in a professional series, you're not getting money as a payout for that. There's not a prize and a purse and prize money. Then you're making money, but you're still not a professional race car driver. So, you know what I'm saying? So, but clearly, and then if you are getting any money or any product, find out what it is you need to do for that company or for that, for that individual who's giving you money. It's an exchange. Okay, I know we got a question in the back of the room. I saw that.
The young woman who was asking about Canada, please see me when this is over.
All right. Woo! I love that.
So, my name is Donna. I manage James Hinchcliffe in the IndyCar series and also a Petro Canada Motorsports program. A little thing for Kara. First and foremost, managing a race car driver in that series, thank you for what you and your team do to keep our drivers safe, whether it's Indianapolis, St. Pete, wherever. You talked about education and mentorship, and racing is a very commercially driven sport, and you work for a very large commercial company. Is there anything that the Bridgestone and Firestone company is doing now to identify a ladder system for education, either in the Akron community, universities, schools, STEM programs, to find either the next Kara Adams or the next commercial tire engineer or whatever, to maybe create an easier path of success for people that want to be successful?
Thanks for that question. So one of the things that I think all of the ladies on this panel and Lyn are very passionate about are mentoring and to get the next generation ready, whether it's to be a driver or an engineer. I'm really proud to be, one of my favorite parts about what I can do is to inspire young girls. My story, 3 years back, I had a young lady come up, somebody's outside, they want you to sign an autograph. So I'm not a driver, but she was there. She's like, no, I read your story. I want to be an engineer when I grow up. I want to do these things. I actually, back in 2008 at Milwaukee, I had a young lady come up to me. She was a junior, and actually she was in 8th grade at the time. And then she found me every year since then. She said, I want to be an engineer when I grow up. I love motorsports. Her name is Narissa. She's actually now an engineer at Harley Davidson. And she was one of those people that was persistent. But as far as what we're able to do at Bridgestone, we're actually working a lot with the Akron community. There's a lot of programs that we work with through either the College of Engineering at the University of Akron or the local community, bringing in students, bringing in teachers. It's really important to get educators aware of what the needs of the industry are. So when there are people out there teaching high schools, they need to know what to teach as far as science classes and all of that. So there's a lot that we're able to do, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody else that we're really passionate about mentoring and getting that next generation ready.
Thank you so much for that question. I'm just going to add a little bit to it. I know I see IUPUI's here. I know they have an engineering program. There are some universities now that have engineering. The other that I would reinforce is the Formula SAE. I mean, that exists. And that, I know I've worked with other universities through other programs that I don't need to describe, but the Formula SAE seems to be where the fruit is born, to get into a motorsports career from an engineering standpoint. And I see a lot more women, even not only actively involved, but being the team leaders. And so I really would pursue the Formula SAE because it exists, as opposed to trying to love to have something new, but to have something initiative.
Also, there's a sister organization, PRI, called SEMA. You're probably familiar with that. SEMA has a very big career track and student involvement. They actually have an entire day that people come in, and we have people from all over the university system and educational system, and that's a great way to at least expose yourself. Or if you have young people that you want to get into the industry, the Hot Rodders of Tomorrow program is out there. But honestly, like over at SEMA, they have the Gear Up Girl event. If you have not been to Gear Up Girl and you want to network with people in the industry, I know a lot of us have been to that event. But
so did everybody hear that? Because so SEMA has Gear Up Girl. I didn't know that. I know the education that they have, that whole thing. I just got that lunch.
Yeah, Gear Up Girl.
That Monday of the SEMA is really for the students, right? Right. The education.
And it's the Businesswoman's Network.
Well, the Businesswoman's Network, which is kind of for the business part of it, not the engineering. But so talk to Dan more about that. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Good questions. Yes, my dear.
We have the mic, so just very quickly, this feels like online dating meeting place because a lot of people shout out, way to go, Lyn, congratulations. And Isabella Robusto just left the room. She is outstanding. She's an example of somebody, a young driver I met last year who is just top notch. So what I'd like from all of you, without starting a huge tizzy, it just struck me that when we're talking about W racing being tokenism or whatever, I would love it if we would all put our heads together and start talking about competition. We're talking about driving with other drivers. So what are our podiums, what are our times, what are our records? So that's just a thought. And Karen, could you be my psychologist?
Gladly.
I'm not clear what your question was.
I don't have answers now. If we can just put our heads together, it's a request to all of us think along Karen's lines of coming together.
Oh yes, no, I think there's more than one way. There'll be multiple ways, I think, of actually making a difference. So I'm learning that.
Can I jump in here? One of the things I was thinking about that question, yes, racing is competitive, it's a competition, but we all support each other. And one of the great initiatives that I've seen in motorsports come up this year is Katie's Field of Female program. And I'll let Katie talk about it, but it's a really fantastic way. As women, we have to stick together. We have to support each other. I love the motorsports community because it's not people fighting people. We support each other, and Katie's done an amazing job with that. And I'd like you to talk about that.
You're so kind. So I started Fuel the Female earlier this year, and it started out as just this day at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway during the month of May. We were inviting 100 Indianapolis public school girls out to go through the different careers that are available to them in motorsports. It's right here in their backyard. What better way to introduce them than meeting women like Kara Adams, Jessica Mace, who is a mechanic at Andretti Autosport. Danica even took some time to talk to the girls. Kate Guerra, who is the head of PR at IndyCar. So I just wanted to introduce them to all these careers because I was like, I know all these badass women. Everybody else should too. Anyway, met another incredible woman who's not even in motorsport. She's actually the film commissioner for the state of Indiana. And she looked at me and she's like, why is this not a full-blown organization? And I'm like, ooh, good question. So fast forward 10 months, and we are a nonprofit now. Just finished our federal paperwork and for 501c3. And if Pie in the Sky dreams, this would be an organization where Sally emails me and says, I want to be an engineer. Great, I know a great engineer to connect you with. Here's Kara. We've already done that a few times, but if you want to help, and this is something you're interested in, I'm more than happy to accept your help and learn from women, because like I said, I'm asking questions and trying to learn kind of on the fly. But this has already been so impactful, where I met I met a girl in high school who is kind of like a young Kara. I don't think you were available that day. She met Kate Gunlack, who is an engineer at Chip Ganassi Racing, and her name is Marissa. Anyway, Marissa from Road America area is just a girl in high school who loves racing and found a high school version of Formula SAE and started building her own, reverse engineering her own race cars and building them from the ground up. And now she's emailing back and forth with Kate Gunlack from Chip Ganassi Racing and just finding out where she can go to college and how she can advance through motorsports. So I hear like Bell Racing, we're going to talk with them today, but they have a great program for drivers, right? Shay, that's all drivers. So 12 drivers, whereas I hope Fuel the Female, we can help drivers, but the forte there, the goal is for that to be more mechanics, engineers, and business women, because coming up through the ranks, I've seen so many resources for drivers specifically, but not so much the mechanics and the engineers, and they feel lonely. So there's a lot of us out there, starting to be more of us out there. If we can create a forum for them, there's Fuel the Female.
I think racing is big and as an industry, but it has all these different, types of racing. I mean, there's a lot of subsets. But I think if there's one common thing in racing, is you've got to figure out how to put it out there and make it happen. I mean, as much as we have clubs and organizations and everything, it takes a lot of initiative to be successful in the sport. So, I mean, I think for a young person to realize if you want to be, even if you want to be an astronaut, there's a fairly, probably Google it, and there's a fairly standard path. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and if you make it, to the cuts, you'll become one. Where if you want to be a race car driver, you want to be a race engineer, you can't just Google it and then say, okay, if you go to this school, you get this degree, you go da-da-da-da-da. There's just not a standard path. Everybody kind of makes their own path. So you have to be that kind of a person that just says, I'm going to make my own way, I'm going to figure this out. But with help. You can't do it alone. But there's people out there. Yes?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. This is my first time coming to one of these workshops, believe it or not, when we come to our country.
Can you stand up and introduce yourself?
My name is Gina. I'm with World Racing Group. We want about New car racing. And one of the things that Karen said that made me think a little bit was I looked around this room and I could not believe. I thought I was going to come into a room full of women today, and I could not believe how many men were there. So thank you for supporting the women that you obviously care about and want to see grow in the industry. And what you said, Karen, was your boyfriend or husband at the time stood by you, and a good man is willing to really stand by and help you build yourself in this industry. I mean, it really, and it's very important. And I didn't realize that, honestly, until I looked around this room and saw all the men. I was like, wow, there really are so many supportive men that want to see women grow in this industry. And so my question is,
Fuel the Female.
Fuel the Female. Is that this, are you looking to help young women, teenagers grow, or is it, are you doing workshops, or is it anybody in the auto or race industry that you're looking to help achieve their goal in this world?
Yes, the short answer, everybody. Long answer, the goal is to have a mentorship program, right, where, because we're having these workshops or days where we have high school girls out to meet all the women that are already working in motorsports. That gives them somebody that they respect, that they can look up to and go to for advice. Also, we have this already mentor network, so to say, where because I work in IndyCar, I know those women the best. I through this have gotten to know some women in NASCAR and in HRA as well, but we connect with each other and we can go to each other directly. So both mentoring and networking, and long answer, does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense, but,
I think it's also online. Can I just?
Yeah, so I fuelthefemale.org, and you can go to the website, and there's a place where you can email Fuel the Female, and I can help find who you're looking for. Or I reach when someone emails Fuel the Female, I look at what they're asking for, and then reach out to my network through Fuel the Female and women that I've met to see if there's a match that I can find help for what you're looking for.
so you have mentors all over the country?
Yes.
Or you're looking for more mentors?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when I launched this in May, I immediately, like I talked to Belle yesterday, they were like, I couldn't believe the response. I'm like, what do you mean you can't believe the response? This is the year of the woman. This is like the it thing right now. So the same thing happened to me. My email blew up, and the only thing I did was have the local news out on the day of the event, and somehow, well, not somehow, through social media, it got all over the country and the world in some cases, and I started getting emails from all these different women all over the country and the world, and through that, I've been able to kind of branch out my network so that now when women are emailing me, I can say, oh, Jamie emailed me back in May, and she is an engineer out in California, and now I've got this student out in California. Awesome, let's connect them.
So I think what I'm hearing, just to try to summarize it, is that even though there's programs, or activities, at the same time, it's really a one-on-one mentor potential, activity. And I just have to comment, they've always said forever that behind every successful man, is a woman. Well, behind every successful woman is many men, probably, to be able to. It's just together, we got to make it happen. Yeah. Well, you finally found her. Okay.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Todd. I'm a junior at the Purdue School of Engineering Technology in the Motorsports engineering program, and this is kind of a question for Kara and Katie. So right now in 3 of my classes, in my vehicle dynamics class, my data acquisition class, and my motorsports practicum class, I'm the only girl. In these 30, 40 classrooms of people, I'm the only girl, and sometimes I feel that I'm a little overlooked in the classroom. So as the chief engineer at Firestone, how did you get to that point where you stopped being overlooked by the men?
So it's good to see you again, Lizzie.
Yeah,
we were on the panel earlier. I love the question. When I started out in the IndyCar series working for Firestone, at that point I was the only engineer that traveled with the series. I actually had a really embarrassing story once where I looked at an email address. I don't know if any of you know Andrea Toso from Delara, but I saw an email and I was like, Andrea, yay, there's another woman. And so I emailed her, not a woman, but that was a little embarrassing. But so I started out there had been plenty of other engineers that had worked in the IndyCar series before me, but at the time I was the only one. And last year we took a picture at the Indianapolis 500, and there were 7 female engineers, and that was it just blew me away to see all of the people there and all the women there. It's great that we've been able to support each other. There have been definitely moments in school, just like you, I felt like I was overlooked at a couple times. There was one professor I had that always said gentlemen this, gentlemen that. And in fact, even my previous manager, when he would send out the data packages to the teams, he would always say gentlemen, and I said, no, you can't do that. And he's like, well, it's just a more formal, it's kind of gender neutral. No, gentlemen is not gender neutral. So I think, and even when I started and I would ask drivers for feedback, they would always give me the company line, oh yeah, the tires were excellent today. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. They don't realize I'm an engineer. So from that aspect, when I started asking more technical questions, not, can you tell me how the tires were today? I would say, did you have any exit understeer as you were going out of turn 3? How did that change the balance of the car? So starting to ask a little bit more technical questions. Once people got to know you, it's a lot easier. So getting yourself out there, you don't have to do anything special. Just once people understand what you're able to do. I had a situation this year where somebody was asking a question. In fact, Takuma Sato came up to me and he said something and he asked the question and he said, okay, yep, you answered it, I trust you. And great, he moved on. So, yeah.
I think to add on to that, Carrie, you told a story earlier where you were applying for the job and you asked him something he'd never been asked before. And I think that really resonated with me, and I hope it resonated with a lot of people, because that showed that Kara had done the preparation, she'd done the hard work, and like Lizzie, we've seen things you've done. Don't underestimate yourself. Have that confidence, because you're already working in IndyCar in some capacities. So I think going back to having that confidence and that preparation is going to help you stand out.
Hey, Lynn, we have a question back here.
Okay.
My name is Angela Gankowski, and next 2019 will be the 10th year that I was racing top dragster for PDRA. And I was just wondering, like, what was my first steps for branding and getting sponsors and stuff like that to move up?
The next steps, is that the question?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
next steps for Brandon?
Well, ultimately what I would do is, if there are products and companies and lifestyle brands that you favor, you start with those. The next step to that is finding a contact. The next step to finding the contact is researching the hell out of them. Figure out what type of cereal they like. Figure out what they do outside of motorsport or what they do outside of their immediate industry. Try to find a personal human connection. All of my sponsorships, it's not just because of a business relationship. They were personally invested in me. I got them to the point where they couldn't say no to me because they would be too sad to say no to the person. So you have to get them emotionally invested, but it has to be followed up by a business opportunity. And so that business opportunity is going to vary from partner to partner to partner. I would say if you don't have a deck, like a CV bio deck about yourself, of just a one-pager, also a deck, a sponsorship type deck. I'm not a huge fan of generic stuff because I feel like you have to have something to give somebody if you're asking a partnership evaluation out of it. But you always are going to end up custom tailoring that sponsorship. So everything from the contract, everything to your proposal deck, emails, all of that stuff has to be custom tailored. And I spend a lot of time at it. And here's where I think I made mistakes earlier in my career. I spent so much time hiding on the computer and like making things look fancy and doing my best. And I did it all on my own. I didn't pay anybody to go and do it because I didn't have funds to do it. So I did it on my own. I wish I spent more time hustling on the phone, making those cold calls, going into the offices, having that more personal conversation versus hiding behind the computer.
That was golden. If you really listen to some of the details of that advice. They didn't say yes to her because they wanted her to go away. Because sometimes, because she talks a lot, right? And she's aggressive. And I'm serious. I mean, somebody can say, God, just say yes or she'll leave. They said it because they couldn't.
I've had somebody do that once.
I have too, but they said yes because they couldn't say no to her as a person because they liked her. So you develop, it's a relationship. So she got to that personal level of relationship, customizing the presentation. Everybody accuses young people of hiding behind. I don't even have my phone, but they're doing all of this. They're like, nobody's afraid. I mean, everybody's afraid to show their face almost, and you'll probably never get a sponsor without a personal meeting, a personal relationship, a personal, connection. And so, you have to go to their offices. Kenny Bernstein got, I don't know if anybody from way back in the drag racing day, when he got the Budweiser, where he was the Budweiser king. How he got Budweiser sponsorship is he painted his car with all the Budweiser sponsorship, took it to Anheuser-Busch because he couldn't get a meeting, parked it right like in their common area outside there, and all the employees came out. Wow, we didn't know we were doing this. It's so cool, And the next thing the brand manager's going, God, we're going to have to do this because everybody in the company thinks we're going to do it. I mean, that's bold. They could have sued him for putting, the logo on the side of the car, but he didn't take it out in public. He just took it to their office. So, sometimes you have to be bold, but you have to be, not sometimes, you always have to be bold, but you have to be able to have a personal story behind that boldness and a plan, and you got to be confident enough that you can show up and have that conversation with somebody and convince them to say yes. So,
Lynn, can I add one thing?
Yeah, I want to add something too.
Okay, well, you go first. Sure.
Just really, the next book to that is sometimes selling yourself isn't enough. Okay, sometimes sometimes the ROI just isn't enough out of you as an individual. The next book, and this is, we'll have to table this for some other time, but is business to business opportunities. And that's something that I'm starting to have some success in, where I'm the beneficiary of putting, say, 2 companies that have a need for maybe a type of product or a service. And I'm putting companies together in hopes that, and you have to have, if you're doing a business-to-business opportunity, it has to be very clear though where you fit into that picture from a long-term perspective. Because if you don't work yourself into that puzzle, and it could be a 3-year payout, it could take 3 years for it to happen, but you got to stay integrated. You got to make sure you're the communicator back and forth. You're kind of the liaison. And you're the beneficiary of that. And if it's a funding type thing, and you get to put that towards racing, great. And if it's not, and you get to go buy a house, go buy a house.
Hey, Lyn, I hate to do this. We have time for one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it because they're going to kick us out of this room.
Oh, okay.
I promised this lady.
All right. Well, then maybe we have 2 because I promised. Are you okay? You're okay. Okay.
So we'll make it quick.
All right. We got it. Okay, go
We're
ahead.
going to toe to toe here, Lyn. I'm telling you.
For the gentleman in the end.
Oh, okay. Well,
Hey, my name's Anna, and I know several people, especially Miss Jeanette up front there. We run a couple groups that support women that race. Some of them are on the level of actually, track racing and all the other categories that there are. But then there are some that are like me that are more spectator-related and support. What my question is how do y'all get more women involved? How do you, because I go to the track every other weekend, and you see the ones that are involved, that we're up front, we're taking pictures, we're cheering, whatever. But then you got the ones that are hanging out in the trailer and they don't, mingle. They don't know how to approach us, or they don't want to. How do you bring more women into the scene?
Have you ever approached them?
All the time.
Exactly.
I invade bubbles a lot. So, I do, but question is, what are some ways that you go, hey, come talk to me. Hey, let me tell you why you should be here more often. How do y'all bring more women in?
Actually, and one of the things I was going to add, and this is just general advice for people just in any field. If you always go forward, in your case, if you always, in every relationship, anybody you meet, if you put their interests ahead of yours first, okay? So when you meet somebody, if it's a company or somebody new, and you start asking them questions about what they want in this world. Most of us approach a conversation as what I want, and you start telling them, and then you just go on with verbal discourse and dysentery, and people are like, shut up, just stop talking. Ask people what they want. In your case, I would say, it's all about everything in this world is about relationships, okay? Make a relationship with them. Find out why they're there. Why are they there? Who are they with? And maybe you'll find some kind of a connection with them. Also, if you have never read the book, The Art of Racing in the Rain, if you don't have it, or you haven't seen it, you don't know what it's about, that which you manifest is before you. I listen to all the time when people say, well, everything I do, I'm in trouble. If you're always the one creating drama, stop doing it. If you're the one, because what you get, what you put out. So you need to start thinking about your own ownership. So that which you manifest, if you manifest positivity, it will come back to you. I guarantee you, in multiple. And if you haven't read the book,
It's going to be a movie,
Speed of Trust. Yeah, exactly. Speed of Trust is another good book.
Yeah, don't start reading that on an airplane because you're going to cry.
Okay.
Hey, Dan, we don't have a question, but he wants to say something.
Yeah, okay.
I'm Dan Aho. I'm a Chief Technical Director for the USA Super Dirt Series out of Pensacola, Florida. And one of the reasons we attended this is the Vice President, Kenny Bullard. One of the reasons we attended this seminar today is so that we can hear what women wanted in motorsports. So we encourage you all. I'm awed at the presence of these ladies that have been in it for quite some time, and the advice that they have given. I've been involved with motorsports since the late 60s in several different divisions. So we've never had a lot of women in some of the sanctioned bodies that I've been involved with. We have had some. I'm sure some of you have heard of Joanna Long. She's out of our area. And we, of course, are great friends with her. But we encourage women to come into the motorsports.
Well, keep doing it. Please.
Absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely.
I think you know we're here, we care, and we love it that you care.
Yes.
So,
I was very happy with the information we found out from you all today.
Good.
And the advice that you've given these young ladies and the ones that want to get into the motorsports.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Well, I think we learned a lot. I just made some quick notes when we were listening about internal compass. And Karen, get the confidence. Be willing to own your passion, your interest. Don't try to hide it or justify it even if you're the Lone Ranger in the room. Relationships are everything. Education, persistence. Ask questions. I could go on forever about asking questions because that's how you do learn. You learn how to ask questions. We could have done a little better today. The mentoring and the networking that are so important. Persistence again. Persistence, persistence, persistence. Do your research and find advocates. You can't do this alone. And so whether it's trying to get more fans, you can't do it alone. It takes a collective force. So you'd be amazed, maybe in Pensacola there's a women's organization that you could invite to come out to the track, maybe when there isn't even any racing going on, and they might actually have a meeting there, and then next thing, hey, this is not so bad. It's not really that dirty. Maybe I can come out, and watch a race. So thank you very much for coming, all of you.